At the altar, Royce Barrett stood with his jaw tight, his mouth set, watching the woman walk toward him. She was not at all what he had envisioned, not like he had hoped, but in 6 months. This very woman, this moment, this union, would save his life, his ranch. And everything he thought he knew about himself. The morning sun cast long shadows across the little wooden church. Royce pulled at his collar, sweat rolling down his forehead. Despite the chilly air in the front pew sat Cyrus Wainwright, his father, arms crossed, hawk-like eyes fixed on him, watching like a predator tracking prey. There was no way out now. The debt was too high, the creditors too eager. And this marriage was the only thing standing between the Barrett Ranch and foreclosure. Magnolia Voss took her time walking down the aisle, her plain brown dress rustling with every step. Royce's stomach twisted as he looked at her round face, her solid figure, her calm presence. This was not the wedding day he'd imagined. He had dreamed of marrying someone beautiful, someone other men would envy, not a stranger, not the daughter of the landowner next door. Land that included the water rights, land more valuable than gold in this drought-ridden county. Breathe. Boy, he whispered to himself, his hands trembling slightly. It's just business. Nothing more. But as Magnolia came closer, something unexpected happened. She raised her head and looked straight at him, not with embarrassment, not with fear, not with unease. Her eyes were steady, unflinching, as though she saw every wild thought in his head, every flicker of pride, shame, anger, and doubt. Mr. Barrett, she said as she arrived at the altar, her voice quiet but unwavering. Miss Voss, he returned. Barely louder than a whisper, the preacher began his familiar words, but Royce barely heard them. His mind churned with bitterness toward his father, toward the situation, toward the woman standing beside him who symbolized everything he didn't want. He thought of the other men in town, the ones who'd laughed behind his back, whispering jokes about his heavy wife, about the Barretts marrying for money. So when the preacher asked, "Do you take this woman?" Royce said, "I do," flat, emotionless, resigned. But when Magnolia spoke her vows, her voice rang out, strong and clear. It echoed through the tiny church, and something in her tone made him turn toward her. Her eyes weren't sad, weren't timid. They burned with a fire he hadn't seen before. And when she said, "I do," it wasn't surrender, it wasn't obligation, it was a declaration. The ring on his finger felt heavy, not just from metal, but from the weight of what he didn't know. They left the church together, and all Royce could think about was how little he truly knew about the woman he had just married. Her back was straight, her head held high, and despite the whispers from the pews, she looked proud, unbothered, distant, like she was more than she seemed. But Royce had no idea that before the sunset, Magnolia would prove just how dangerous it was to underestimate her. The ride back to the ranch felt like the longest hour of his life. Magnolia sat beside him in silence, her hands folded neatly in her lap, not timid, not submissive. It felt like the quiet before a storm at last. Desperate to break the tension, Royce said, "I suppose you'd like to see the house," his voice rougher than intended. "I've already seen it," Magnolia replied without looking at him. 3 times, actually. "While you were in town, drowning your misery at the saloon." His hands tightened on the reins. How did she know that? Had he been so careless? "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. "Of course you don't," her voice almost amused now. "Just like you don't know your ranch hands have been offering to sell off your livestock to pay their own debts, or that half of what your father owes has nothing to do with my family's land." The wagon jolted, but Royce barely noticed, his thoughts spinning. "That's not true. Those men have worked for us for years. They're loyal. Loyalty doesn't put food on the table, Mr. Barrett," Magnolia said. "Men in need act like men in need." She finally turned to face him, and what he saw in her eyes made his stomach sink. "Your foreman, Wade McKinley, has been watching 6 months' worth of cattle sales. Your father can't afford to fire him, and Wade's the only one keeping the rest of them from quitting altogether." When they arrived at the ranch house, Royce sat motionless, gazing at his land with new eyes. The sagging fence posts, the overgrown corral, the dry pasture. It all made sense now. His father hadn't just been struggling, the ranch had been bleeding. Slow and steady. This marriage wasn't a fix, it was a tourniquet. "How do you know all this?" he asked. Voice low. I've been preparing for this marriage longer than you, Magnolia said, stepping from the wagon with quiet grace. This isn't just about union. Mr. Barrett, it's about land rights because your ranch holds the key to controlling water across 3 counties, and someone needed to be smart enough to make it work. She stopped at the front steps, turned slightly. The only question is whether you're proud enough to lose everything, or smart enough to listen. Royce watched her enter their home, questions racing. Who was this woman? How did she know so much about his family's business? And more importantly, what else did she know that he didn't? And as he unhitched the horses, one thought kept rising. If she already knew so much, what was her endgame? By nightfall, it was clear marrying Magnolia was like inviting a tornado into his house. Nothing would remain the same. He found her in his father's study, seated behind the massive oak desk like she'd always belonged there. Papers everywhere, property records, legal documents, blueprints, financial statements, arranged like a war map. And Wade McKinley stood before her, pale, sweating like a schoolboy. Called to the principal's office. What's going on? Royce demanded. Wade's face was ashen, and Magnolia didn't even look up. I know about the cattle, she said gently. I know you've been selling 15 head a month and reporting 10. I know you've been pocketing the difference and planning to blame rustlers when the books didn't line up. The ground shifted beneath Royce. Wade had been like family, trusted, and now, this isn't true. Wade muttered, the ranch is falling apart anyway. I've got kids to feed. You had a job. Magnolia replied, her tone like a blade. Now you have a choice. Return what you took, or I bring the sheriff before dawn. Wade's face hardened. You think you can just walk in here and start barking orders? You're just a fat woman whose daddy paid someone to marry her. The silence that followed was deafening. Royce expected her to flinch, to retreat, but Magnolia stood slowly, her every movement deliberate. Mr. McKinley, she said, voice like silk turning to steel. You think my strength lies in my size? That was your first mistake? She opened the desk drawer, pulled out a small leather journal. The second mistake was assuming I came unprepared. She flipped the pages. May 5th, 10th. 20 head sold to Morrison's outfit. May 22nd, 18 sold, 12 reported. June 3rd, sold 10, reported 10, and so on. Wade went for his pocket, hand twitching toward a hidden pistol. But Magnolia didn't flinch. I wouldn't, she said, because the third mistake was assuming I came alone. The sound of boots on the porch rang like gunshots. Royce turned toward the window, saw 3 men approaching the house, rough, silent, armed. Who are they? He whispered. Magnolia smiled, the first true smile he'd seen from her, and it wasn't kind. In Mr. Barrett, she said. You'll find out soon enough. Barrett, the type that guarantees to keep their word, the kind that doesn't run when things get hard. Wade ran for the door, only to find his way blocked. One of the 3 men had just stepped in, the largest of them all, built like a mountain, his knuckles scarred, his eyes full of the kind of violence that didn't need to be spoken. Friend, you heading somewhere? The massive man asked, friendly enough, but the weight behind his words was iron-knit. Then Royce began to understand. This wasn't just about a marriage or his father's way of settling debts. This was something bigger, something older. The fight lasted precisely 3 minutes. Wade McKinley, who had stood so tall, crumbled like a shack in a windstorm, outnumbered, outgunned, exposed. The money's in my cabin. Wade stammered, the arrogance gone. I spent some of it. My youngest was sick, needed medicine. The fever nearly killed her. Magnolia's face softened just slightly. How much? She asked. $40. Wade whispered. You'll give the rest back, she said. And think of the 40 as severance. She nodded to the big man. Hank will walk you to get it, and by dawn, you're gone. As Wade was escorted out, Royce grabbed Magnolia's arm. Who are these men? He asked. How do you know them? Magnolia looked at him, truly looked at him. For the first time since they met, her expression unreadable. That's tricky, she said. Complicated? Complicated how? Royce pressed. My foreman just confessed to stealing, and 3 armed strangers are in my home. I think I deserve an explanation. Magnolia stepped away, toward the window, watching Hank escort Wade toward the bunkhouse. My father didn't just arrange this marriage for land. Royce, he arranged it because your ranch sits on the most valuable water rights in 3 counties. She turned back to him, and for the first time he saw it, fear, real fear in her eyes. But there are others who want those rights too. Dangerous people, the kind who'd rather see you dead than successful. Someone tried to buy the ranch. She said, Cormac Doolan, he made an offer. Your father said no, and Doolan said, plain as day, that stubborn ranchers have accidents. Royce's stomach dropped. You're telling me someone's trying to kill me? I'm saying someone's willing to kill anyone who holds that land. That's why my father rushed the marriage. That's why I brought protection. She nodded to the men outside. We need to work together. Whether you like me or not. Before Royce could answer, the sound of a gunshot rang out from the bunkhouse. They saw Hank through the window. Staggering, holding his shoulder, Wade McKinley, now riding away on horseback, firing a revolver. Magnolia exhaled. I was ready for this. He knew we'd figure it out. Another shot shattered the study window, sending Royce's drink crashing to the floor. He grabbed Magnolia and pulled her down, bullets whizzing past, splinters erupting from the walls. Stay down, he shouted, reaching for the revolver on his belt, but as he peeked over the desk, blood ran cold. Wade wasn't alone. At least 6 riders appeared at the edge of the property, armed, moving with intent. Magnolia, Royce said, voice tight. How did Wade? No, we were coming for him tonight. Her face turned pale, the realization hitting them both at once. He was told. She said. Gunfire erupted again, bullets tearing through the house like a storm of iron. Royce crawled toward the gun cabinet. Magnolia pressed herself against the desk. How many men do you have? Royce shouted over the din. 3, Magnolia replied. But Hank's down, and the other 2 are pinned in the barn. Royce did the math. Trapped in a house, outnumbered 2 to 1, and this place wasn't built for a siege. He grabbed a rifle, but froze. Peering through the broken glass, he saw Wade, pointing directly at the study, waving the others toward them, as if he knew exactly where they were. Magnolia, he said slowly. Wade didn't know we'd be in